Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in.
Hello. Welcome back. I'm glad that you all are here with us today. If you remember the last episode, we started with some questions from kids that Kim had asked as she was taking the kids back and forth to school. And today we're going to continue that. They come from slightly older kids, but it's still questions from kids. So we're going to start that way. Maybe we'll start that way for a long time, or maybe we'll start that way for 2 weeks and we'll never do it again. Who knows? But
maybe, who knows? It depends on how many questions we get.
That's true. That's very true.
I actually like questions from kids. I was telling Josh before this. I feel like kids ask the most basic and simple questions that sometimes are the hardest to answer, especially when you live in a box, which we've talked about this. Like, I'm continually breaking down the box that I live in and then building another one unknowingly and then having to break it down.
Right.
So I think they're so challenging, even though they tend to be really simple.
Well, sometimes it's the simple things that the simple things that confound the wise, but the simple things that, like, it's hard to explain sometimes at that level. But I think it was Albert Einstein that said, you don't really understand a topic unless you could explain it to a child. Because if you do explain it to a child, no matter if it's quantum physics or whatever it is, you would be able to use terminology that they understand. And I think that's like such a real thing, because I find myself in that place often where I'm like, man, I believe this, but I don't quite know how to express it. And it's not until you have the wording for it that you really have wrapped your mind around it.
Mm-hmm. I think that tends to be true. Okay, so our first question, this one comes from Henry, who is my newly adult child. He actually, since he was little, has always had the best questions about faith. And my whole statement about kids asking the best questions comes from my history with him and asking really great questions. So his first question is, do you think Hitler is in heaven?
What do you think, Kim? How did you answer when he asked?
I didn't answer. This is the fun thing about it. Okay, I'm just asking for questions.
Gotcha.
I'm not immediately trying to answer them. But I want them to know that I will think about it, and I would love to be able to answer all of them because I think it's fun and it challenges us to think about different things too. So immediately, when I think about this, I think yes. Simple, yes, I think Hitler's in heaven. What about you?
I think it's possible, but I don't know that it has to be for sure. And we talked about this maybe last time we talked to Gil, but just about the concept of does your freedom to choose God, to choose restoration, to choose heaven, does it ever go away? And like, I tend to think it doesn't, but I still think it takes your choice. So I think it's possible that he has made that choice and is in heaven, but I think it's also possible that he hasn't made that choice. I don't actually know. I have no basis for it.
That's interesting. I tend to believe that whether you go through refining now or later, which we've also talked about in regard to the concept of hell, I think there is a refining fire. And I tend to believe that everyone will go through it, whether now or later. But I also think that on the other side of like life in this body, it is even more compelling to choose that, almost as though, okay, we talk about the concept of the trees often, like the tree of life or the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
And I almost don't know that there is such a pull from the tree of knowledge at that point. It is like the tree of life is all there is. And so you've got one choice. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
when are you going to do that? I don't know. But also, I think I can speak in current times, but in eternity, kind of doesn't matter if it is now or later or 200 years ago. It's kind of all now, you know?
Yeah.
And so if eventually someone will come there, I think, yes, they are there just because time is different.
Sure. I think that fits really well into the second question.
Yes. Okay. So his second question was this: how do you think time in infinity feels, or in eternity feels? Which is kind of a mind-bending question.
Right. Yeah. So my initial thought, and we were sort of chatting about some things before we started recording, and this I feel like is a similar question. But I think we cannot even conceptualize it because of how outside of our understanding of time it is. But also I think it just doesn't work the same way. Like eternity or infinity or time does not exist the same way, because I think time is a created thing.
It's like a construct.
Yeah. And so for God to create time, he has to be outside of time. Because I don't think you can create something that you're already bound by. And so so he has to be outside of it. And so time, like trying to explain infinity time or eternal time using any type of framework of time is already, I think, the wrong question, because it's just not the same thing. Like there's no way to explain it in a way that makes sense with our understanding of time. That's my thought.
Yeah. I tend to agree. However, I also want to kind of bring myself to the edge of imagining that.
Yeah.
And placing myself there, because I've also seen timelines, like in engaging heaven and placing yourself in heaven with the Father, with Yeshua. Like I've been taken to a place where I can see timelines. And so it does exist. It's like time does exist. It's just, it's not the rule by which you live. It is like a substance. I mean, I guess it could be a tool. I guess you could call it kind of a tool, but it's not so like spread out everywhere, like overarching. Like it's not like a blanket effect, right? So that's interesting to me. But the question is, how do you think time in eternity feels? And I would almost have to say, I think it probably feels impermanent, like that. I don't know. It's kind of like eating a hamburger. Like it's here right now. I can see it. I can touch it. I can taste it. I can smell it, whatever. I can eat it, but then it'll be gone. Even if I don't eat it and I leave it alone, I come back, it may not look the same or be the same. Someone else may have used it. Like, I think it is just completely different.
Yeah.
I think it feels completely different because it's not something by which you're bound.
Yeah. I'm having a thought of like, in that bound kind of mindset of like, right now on Earth, like, I would say the majority of humanity feels very limited on time.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's time in a day to get certain tasks done or it's time on Earth. Like, I think the majority of humanity feels like there's a shortage of time. Even people who talk about rich time and they're like, oh, I started thinking about time differently and I just have so much time now. Like, I think it's probably similar to that, but like times a million, where even if there is a construct of time in eternity, which there might be, it might be an important piece of it. I just think it won't feel, I don't think there will ever be a heavy feeling to time.
Well, because it's not, I mean, so many people, how many people have you heard say that time is the most limited and precious resource
Right.
that we have? Right.
Yeah.
But if you are in eternity, if you are in infinity, it's not limited.
Right.
Because there is no end and there is no beginning.
Yeah.
And it will never run out. So that immediately puts it in a different category of it's not limited, which even as a tool, you would absolutely probably use it differently.
Right. Yeah.
Differently.
I mean, it's the same way we use resources on Earth now, like things that are very abundant. There's it just opens up so many things. Like, I think one thing it opens up is like playfulness and innovation, because there's less risk in experimenting with something that is super plentiful. And so there's lots of studies and experiments that have been done on air and water and some of those elements. But there's far less experiments that have been done on, like, I don't know,
Gold.
Like, yeah. And there's still been a lot of experiments with gold, but like,
right.
It's less because there is something. So if time is so abundant that there is never a concern about it running out, then maybe you're free to play with time a bit more and in a different way. And that's a really interesting thought, to be like, well, what does playing with time look like?
Mm-hmm. For sure. You know what else I wonder about time in eternity? You know, the concept of like splinters of timelines and stuff, right? So you come up to a decision today. Am I going to have white milk? Am I going to have chocolate milk? Whatever the question is, the decision. And so I decide chocolate milk today and it's going to take me down this road. And or I would have decided white milk and it would have taken me down this road. Or big questions too, whatever. But essentially, then there are two timelines created where both were realities. One was this decision and one was this decision. And then you ultimately have all of these millions of these different timelines that were created. So I wonder, regarding time in eternity, what that looks like with all of those different branches of the timelines. You know what I mean? We've talked about the Mandela effect. That's like a really good example of a big branching off of timelines. I would say. I don't know. I just heard a bunch of people like hit stop, like next episode or whatever. But I mean, I actually think it's a real thing. You can disagree with me and that's totally fine. But I actually do wonder what it would be like to sit and feel time in that eternity when there are all of these different timelines? Like, do you go step in and see what that one was like? And do you go step in and see what that one was like? Or is it all irrelevant? You know?
Part of, I think, the restoration of all things, which we touched on with the Hitler question, is the restoration of all the timelines. Like, I think that's part of what will happen. And
so the coming back in from all the branches back into like an ideal.
Yeah.
Is that what you would say?
I think that's my current feeling of it. You know, whether or not that's real or not, I don't know. But because I do think that they're, at least energetically, all the choices that you make go on forever. And so how do you bring those back in? Is part of eternity going into each of those timelines and making choices in them that bring them back closer to the ideal one until they merge back together? Like, is that part of that? That would be an interesting thing. Like, I don't know. I think it's fun to think about and guess. I really don't have a good idea of what it actually will be like. But I do think that there will be a restoring of time. I don't know that it will continue branching off in the way that it does now.
That's
Maybe
interesting to think about. I don't know. Here's a good tip. If you want to know about it, you should go ask the Lord.
Yeah, that's always the best.
I've learned lots of things just simply by asking. You know, like silly questions, very serious questions, things that are way outside my pay grade, you know. You kind of never know until you ask. And I think that's one of the funnest parts of having relationship.
Yeah.
Is the ability to go to, oh, hey, you're the creator of all of this. Can you tell me a little bit about this? I have a question for you.
Can you just drop a little bit of knowledge?
Right.
And the fun part for me has been when I do ask questions, I usually, the response I get is more questions. And it just creates this like, so you go and ask the question because you have relationship, but the answer just creates more relationship because you have to keep going back. And I think that that's a really cool thing. That's a really cool thing about how this system is set up.
I think you're right. We keep talking about this, or I keep talking about this. You know that ask, seek, and knock. Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be opened. What if that's a cycle? Like you ask the question, you seek out the things you don't know, and then you go and knock on the door again to ask the question so you can seek the things that you don't know so that you can go and knock on the next door. And you know what I mean? Like, what if this is kind of part of the cycle of the relationship?
Right. Yeah.
You know?
I think it is. And I think the questions with kids is a cool earthly example of that, because it's just what they're doing is just saying, hey mom, what about this? This is a thought I had, and the thought may be wrong, and you may be able to say, well, no, that doesn't quite work because of blah blah blah, but it's creating a space where asking, seeking is encouraged and rewarded. We were just talking about this the other night. I was talking about this with some friends about this study that they did with children on reward systems. And so they took two groups of kids, and one of them they told to draw the best, and maybe we've talked about this here too, I don't know, but draw the best drawing that they could do in 5 minutes. And the other group of kids, they said, draw as many drawings as you can in 5 minutes. And the majority of time, the kids who were told to draw as many as they could drew better art than the ones who only had to draw one. And after like looking at it and talking to them, the reason they came up with was because they felt free to make mistakes and try again. And the kids who only had one chance were looking at it like, oh, I only have one chance to do this as good as I possibly can. And if I get it wrong, that's the only, like, it's over. And so they spend a lot of time worrying about it instead of just rewarding the process. Like the other option is rewarding the process, rewarding the try.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is like, that's a big thing to, if we start to instill in our kids the, like, hey, your questions are amazing, ask as many as you want, you're like, you trying this is amazing, try as many times as you want, like, it's going to lead to better questions, better kids, better better society, probably.
Yeah. Okay, with that being said, I would like to just put the invitation out there that if anybody listening or watching has some questions from their kids that they want to send in and have us talk about, I would love to get those.
Yeah, we'll tackle all the questions with kids.
And if you even want us to mention their name, we will. We also don't have to.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you want. It doesn't have to be anything horribly complicated, but I mean, I think those are the things that are important. And just like you said with that study, like, it's really important to know that you can ask and you can get an answer.
Yeah.
But you also might be encouraged to also seek on your own. Right? But maybe can we create that space where it's okay and acceptable to seek and to still come back and knock and then ask and then seek some more? I mean, I think that's important. I hope that my kids know that they can always come, like, you come knock, please. Like, we'll open the door to the conversation, ask all the questions, and we may even seek together.
Yeah.
You know? And maybe sometimes it'll be their own journey too that they need to seek on. It may be something I know the answer really quickly to. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. You're going to have to seek on that. I'm here for you, but find out.
Yeah.
Report back.
I think that's obviously how God answers our questions, because he knows the answer. But I think he asks questions that lead you on a journey of discovery. Very rarely does he just come right out and give the answer. Sometimes, maybe. But it's way more meaningful if you find it yourself. And if you find it yourself through relationship with him, through that journey with him, it's a pretty great place to be.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, this was an interesting conversation, spurred by the questions from the non-child child.
Thank you, Henry, for the questions.
Thank you, Henry. He's the best. He's just great guy. Okay. Well, like we said, give us some feedback, send us some questions, all the things. We love to hear from people. And until then, I guess we'll see you next time.
See you guys later.
Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.